how do you decide what a chemical is? Is dihydrogen monoxide a chemical in your book?
Can you give me the short version?
Dihydrogen monoxide.
Is that oxygen?
No, that's water.
Water. Oh, water.
But that's what I'm saying. You could make
I'm not
anything.
a chemist or anything.
But
What you just watched is the most important moment in any debate about science, public health, or basically anything where there's a loaded word doing all of the work. And in this case, that word is chemicals.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
And then, suddenly, she discovers that the scary sounding chemical turns out to be water.
I'm not a chemist or anything.
But
Look, this isn't a gotcha. No, it is the natural consequence of an argument that was always running on vibes and intuitions, a single suggestive word doing the work that evidence and reason should have been doing instead. And it gets worse. Or better, depending on how you look at it.
Or maybe we should look at the food industry and ask why there's so much sugar in absolutely everything.
can you walk and chew gum at the same time?
Are you going to bring up correlation?
No.
Peter, come on, walk over here.
I'm doing something, one thing at a time.
Why hello my fellow apes, I hope you are well. We're looking at a Jubilee episode of Surrounded, the show where one person sits across from a rotating panel of opponents to debate a series of propositions. On one side we have Dr. Mike, a board-certified family physician and one of the more visible defenders of evidence-based medicine online.
I'm gonna show you how to reset your nervous system in 30 seconds.
Wow. Oh my god, it's like we're Windows PC.
On the other side sits 20 RFK Jr. supporters, and our prompt is,
That RFK Jr. is decimating public health and should step down as Secretary of Health and Human Services.
today we're looking at Dr. Mike's exchange with Anastasia. The topic that she leads with is fluoride, and we need to pay close attention to what happens when she actually has to defend it. Because what starts as a simple question, why is fluoride in the water in the first place, turns into something else entirely the moment Dr. Mike questions what's actually wrong with it. We'll see how she cycles through framings. We go from natural versus artificial,
Why would I want water with an extra ingredient if I could just have pure water?
to endogenous versus exogenous,
There's a difference between endogenous chemicals, things that I can make my body makes, right?
Right.
And exogenous chemicals.
and we end it with what we're born with versus what's added later.
I wasn't born with fluoride in my
Yeah, but
system.
Each one arrives just as the previous one starts to fall apart, each carried by the same single word, chemical. And she ends up reaching pretty far for an answer.
Where did the
things
first
we need.
single-celled amoeba get the water from?
Yeah, that far back. The beginning of life, abiogenesis. We're going to see Dr. Mike calmly educate a conspiracy theorist. He concedes real points, he refuses false choices, and every time Anastasia draws a new line, he tests it with the most obvious counterexample he can find, patiently, until she has nowhere left to hide. Let's get to it.
Just a little leap.
Hello, hello.
Nice to meet you, Dr.
Pleasure.
Mike.
Nice
How
to
are
meet
you?
as well. I'm excited to be here because, a lot of times when people do these debates, folks want to win. And genuinely, I want to learn from you guys and learn what we're doing wrong in healthcare that's impacting you. So I'm all ears.
Right out of the gate, Mike sets a friendly tone. He's explicitly positioning himself as someone who wants to learn from Anastasia, as opposed to someone trying to intellectually defeat her. Now, this appears to be Mike's default state, but whether he has deliberately set the tone or not, it's also strategic. He's lowered the temperature and presented himself as curious, open-minded, and willing to hear criticism. Put it this way, it's very hard to aggressively attack someone who opens with such kindness.
And learn what we're doing wrong in healthcare that's impacting you. So I'm all ears.
I completely agree. It's not about winning, it's about getting to the truth. And I think we all can agree that we all want the truth.
Anastasia matches the energy, and it's worth briefly pausing to appreciate it. When both sides explicitly drop the scoreboard, the conversation has a much better chance of actually going somewhere. We've covered more than enough debates on this channel to know how ugly they can get when people walk in treating it as a contest to win. I mean, remember when we broke down Ben Shapiro's infamous interview with Andrew Neil?
I'm popular and no one has ever heard of you.
Later.
I'm not inclined to continue an interview with a person as badly motivated as you as an interviewer. So I think we're done here. I appreciate your time.
All
sir.
right.
Thank
So yeah, setting tone early on both sides is what makes a productive dialogue possible. Whether it will hold up is another question.
We all want the truth, and that's why that's one of the reasons why I support RFK, is because he supports transparency.
Okay.
And especially with like vaccines and healthcare and everything like that.
Sometimes a story is, on paper, completely settled, and yet by the time it's filtered through the media, you're staring at 3 different events. This week, that story was Trump pauses Project Freedom in Strait of Hormuz for short period. Without a tool like Ground News, you'd have to wade through dozens of outlets just to assemble a full picture, and most of us simply don't have the time. Ground News does that legwork for you every day. They're an app and website that pulls thousands of articles into one place, sorting them by story and tagging each one with a breakdown of bias, factuality, and ownership. The full picture in one place, and this story shows exactly why that matters. 479 outlets have covered it, 78 leaning left, 116 centrist, and 84 leaning right. You can follow along at ground.news/rationality. Take the World Socialist website, far left with mixed factuality. It states, facing mounting crisis, Trump reverses course on escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Crisis does a lot of work there, and reverses course is a retreat under pressure. They're telling a story about Trump being forced to back down. Then there's the Daily Journal, centrist with high factuality. Trump says, pausing Hormuz operation in push for Iran deal. Clean and direct. Trump announced the pause, it's tied to negotiations, and that's the whole story. No spin in either direction. And then we have protrumpnews.com. Far right, low factuality. Will be paused for a short period of time. Trump pauses Operation Project Freedom. The headline is just Trump's own words in quotes. The body is his Truth Social post copy-pasted. Great progress, complete and final agreement, tremendous military success. It's not reporting, it's retyping a press release. Same set of facts. One outlet calls it a retreat, one calls it a deal, and one just reprints the press release. 3 outlets, 3 realities. Ground News is how you see all 3, so that you can make your own informed conclusion. Get 40% off their Vantage plan at ground.news/rationality or scan the QR code on screen. You'll be supporting independent media and, indeed, this channel at the same time. Thanks.
That's one of the reasons why I support RFK, is because he supports transparency.
Okay.
And especially with like vaccines and healthcare and everything like that.
Notice the vocabulary. Truth, transparency. Nobody can come out against words like these, which is precisely what makes them useful here. She never has to say how truth gets identified or what transparency would actually look like in practice. These words just hang there, virtuous and unfalsified, doing their persuasive work in advance, so that when the actual claims arrive, they land on a ground that's already been softened. Also, associating RFK with truth. That is a bit like associating a bear with picnic safety.
I see somebody on a hiking trail with carrying a little baby, and I say to them, better not get them vaccinated. And he heard that from me. If he hears it from 10 other people, maybe he won't do it. Maybe he will save that child.
Anyway, here comes the central claim, and let's listen closely because everything downstream follows from this.
And especially with like vaccines and healthcare and everything like that. Another thing about RFK is that he's working to get fluoride out of the water. Why do we have fluoride in the water in the first place? Is it for dental care? I think that's an individual thing. If you want strong teeth, you should probably just brush your teeth and floss. You know what I mean? You shouldn't rely on a government-regulated system of our water system to give you good dental care. Like, I feel like there's ulterior motives.
Intriguingly, she isn't really engaging with the actual justification for fluoridation. Rather, she's reframing it as a matter of personal discipline. Brush properly, floss properly, take personal responsibility. Clean your room.
This thing that I've said to people has become this crazy internet meme, but that's to clean up your room.
And you know what? There is a good comparison to be drawn here, and it is worth unpacking. Peterson's line works because it points at something real. Personal responsibility matters. Of course it does. There are problems that genuinely sit inside of what you, individually, can fix, and pretending otherwise is just as much a cop-out as pretending the structural ones don't exist. But there's a cost when fix yourself first becomes the entire frame. Namely, the societal layer quietly drops off the table. Policy, infrastructure, the conditions that shape outcomes for millions of people, all of it just stops being part of the conversation. And that's the move that Anastasia is making. Brush your teeth, floss, mind your own business, government. Same vanishing act. A population level question gets folded into a personal discipline one, and once it's been folded, the policy question just disappears. Mike is about to push back on that framing in just a moment, but before he gets there, let's address the scary shadowy cabal.
Like, I feel like there's ulterior motives.
What she's doing here has a name. Innuendo, implying something damaging without ever actually saying it outright. There's no mechanism, there's no evidence, no clear allegation, just the vague feeling that something's off. And that is exactly what makes it rhetorically useful. She gets to borrow the force of a conspiracy without committing to one that could actually be examined.
I feel like there's ulterior motives.
Are you
know what I mean?
against government programs that try and help groups of people as opposed to just individuals?
Not necessarily, it just depends on what it is.
Now this is sharp. Like a doctor, Dr. Mike's move is a clean diagnostic. He's testing whether her objection is principled. Because if she's against public health programs as a category, that's one debate. But if she's only against this one, fluoride specifically, then she owes him a substance-specific reason.
Not necessarily, it just depends on what it is.
Alright, there it is. She declines the broad anti-government principle, which means she now has a debt to pay. She has to give a criterion. What makes this program different from the ones that she'd accept? And Mike is going to lean on that. Hard.
Not necessarily, it just depends on what it is.
Well, because when we say in America that the chronic health diseases in children is going up, it is. And I think I agree with everyone here on that. Statistics don't lie. But one of those chronic issues is dental disease. So if we can do something,
can be improved by that, I think parents should stop giving their children so much sugar. Or maybe we should look at the food industry and ask why there's so much sugar in absolutely everything.
Right, it's getting hectic, so let's slow this down. Mike's mid-sentence, building towards a point. Chronic disease in kids is rising. Dental disease is part of that. So, if we can do something, like maintain fluoridation of the water, we should. That is the move he's about to make. But before he can finish the thought, she cuts him off with sugar.
Parents should stop giving their children so much sugar.
And look, don't get me wrong, sugar is relevant to dental health. But I'm pretty sure we all know that by now. This is a typical move from the RFK crowd. Score points by stating the obvious, and Anastasia is clearly exercising it. Professor Dave has dismantled this precise technique on Piers Morgan, when Piers was busy praising RFK, no less, for the bold revelation that junk food is bad for you.
Look, this is the one thing where it's like, yeah, junk food is bad for you. Are we going to give this guy a medal for saying that junk food is bad for you? Everybody knows that.
What, you want a cookie?
Back to what Anastasia just said. Pointing at sugar doesn't tell us anything about whether fluoridation is justified. These are parallel interventions. You can do both. You can do neither. The existence of sugar as an upstream cause doesn't settle the question at hand.
Or maybe we should look at the food industry and ask why there's so much sugar in absolutely everything.
Can you walk and chew gum at the same time?
Are you going to bring up correlation?
No.
Well, it seems that Anastasia doesn't know what walk and chew gum at the same time means. That's not, a knock on her, it's just an idiom for doing two things at once, and not everyone's heard of it. Fair enough. Mike is about to spell it out for her.
No.
Yeah, you can walk and chew gum at the same time.
So you can do both things. Like, why can't we encourage patients and parents to not overfeed their kids added sugars and make government programs that improve children's health?
But there's no point, why would I want water with an extra ingredient if I could just have pure water? You know what I mean? Why would I need a government organization?
Well, you can buy water without fluoride.
There's the word the entire argument is going to live or die on. Chemical. First, the agreement. She just conceded twice that yes, both things can happen. We can encourage parents not to overload their kids with sugar and run public health programs. So her objection isn't to public health programs in principle, it's specifically with this one, which means the weight of the argument now sits entirely on what's wrong with fluoride itself.
Why would I need a government organization?
Well, you can buy water without fluoride.
Let's unpack what the word chemical is doing in her sentence, because the rest of this exchange is going to be a slow motion demolition of it. There are two things that are going on here. What she's saying and what she's implying. What she's saying is technically accurate. A chemical is just an added molecule, something that wasn't in the water originally. Fine. But what she's implying is something else entirely. That a chemical is an unhealthy contaminant, something bad for you, as opposed to just have pure water.
Why would I want water with an extra ingredient if I could just have pure water?
Those aren't the same claim. Her argument, however, needs them to feel like the same claim, because otherwise she has to actually prove that fluoride at regulated doses is harmful, and that is a much harder fight. This is the seed of what will eventually become a full-blown equivocation. The word chemical does all of the heavy lifting, and it does so by smuggling in a moral judgment under the cover of a technical-sounding term. And it's pretty funny when you think about it, because there's a problem hiding inside that pure water comment. Tap water isn't a single substance, is it? It already contains calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, and trace amounts of iron, zinc, and copper, and, crucially, fluoride.
Why do we have fluoride in the water in the first place?
Yeah, fluoride. Naturally occurring fluoride. Hell, in some regions of the world, at concentration levels several times higher than what gets added to municipal supplies. So if her standard is natural is fine, then fluoride passes. It's been in groundwater since long before any government got involved. The baseline she's contrasting fluoride against, pristine, unadulterated water from a tap, doesn't actually exist. The natural water she's defending already contains the very thing she's objecting to. And underneath all of this, there's a hidden assumption doing the work, an appeal to nature, a fallacy. The idea that natural is safe and artificial addition is dangerous. But that contrast falls apart the moment you look at what's actually in the natural water she's defending. It also implies that she would always opt for natural water over artificial, but I somehow doubt that's true. We add chlorine to our tap water too, and have been doing so for over a century to kill bacteria that cause typhoid and cholera.
Organization.
Well, you can buy water without fluoride.
But why should I have to buy it? I think water, obviously, nothing's free, but like water without chemicals should be free to get. If I want to drink out of my faucet, I should be able to do that without having fluoride in it, without having to worry about fluoridosis or any other over fluoridation, in my body.
Water without chemicals. Now, if a moment ago you thought I was reaching by listing off the calcium, magnesium, zinc, and the rest, well, here we are. Because the implication is now obvious. When she says water without chemicals, what she actually means is water without the bad stuff.
Water without chemicals should be free to get.
That's the equivocation we flagged made explicit. The technical word, chemical, and the moral judgment, bad, are being treated as if they're the same thing. They aren't. And let's not forget, everything is made up of chemicals. Water itself is a chemical.
Fluoridosis or any other over fluoridation, in my body. Mm-hmm. Why would I not be
and you're against
privy to that?
Buying a filter to get rid of
I'm not against that, but why should I have to go out and buy that?
A quick note on the filter point. Let's actually apply her logic to a different added substance, chlorine. If someone said, I shouldn't have to buy a filter to get chlorine out of my tap water, what would your response be? Probably something like, yeah, it's there for a reason. It's there to keep you safe. If you personally want it out, sure, go ahead. But the default is that it's in there because the default is set by public health, not by individual preference. That's the answer that applies to fluoride. The default is set by what produces net benefit at a population level. If you, as an individual, want to opt out, the cost of opting out falls on you. That's not unreasonable, that's just how every public health intervention works, or at least should work.
But why should I have to go out and buy that?
Well, because everything,
you know what I mean?
Everything in healthcare or public health always has a trade-off. Like if I'm giving anyone any medication, any therapy, there's always risks and benefits. So when we think about the benefit of putting fluoride in water in order to get kids to have healthier teeth, we think about the impact on the general population. And in fact, you're right, there's been some research that shows people who have high levels of fluoride, especially children, actually this doesn't apply to adults at all, but only for children, they can have neurologic issues.
Exactly.
This is Mike making a strong move and quietly changing the test in the process. Anastasia has been operating on a purity standard. Her position is that added equals bad, untouched equals good, and Mike is not doing the lazy thing of pretending every criticism is nonsense. He, in fact, concedes a specific point that's actually true. Yes, fluoride at high enough exposure can be harmful to children. And that concession is brilliant, because it drags the conversation onto the only terrain that ever really matters in toxicology or public health: dose, context, and population. The origin of the chemical is irrelevant. What matters is dose and effect. The real dispute isn't is it a chemical, nor is it was it added by, a government. It's how much, in whom, and at what effect. But notice, as soon as Mike concedes that high-dose fluoride can cause neurological problems in children, she pounces on it.
Exactly.
As if she's just scored a major point. But she hasn't. What he conceded was narrower. Fluoride at high levels is harmful. You know, just like everything, including water.
This doesn't apply to adults at all, but only for children. They can have neurologic issues.
Exactly.
Now, here's the thing. There's a foundational principle in toxicology that goes back to the 16th century. Paracelsus put it this way: the dose makes the poison. What he meant is that every substance on Earth is harmful at a high enough dose, and almost every substance is harmless at a low enough one. Toxicity isn't in the name, it's in the quantity. But in Anastasia's model, harm is binary. A substance is either safe or it isn't.
Exactly.
However, it's very important to look at the numbers and the areas that were studied, because certain areas, like in Asia, they have naturally very high levels of fluoride, not added by the government, natural occurring fluoride. And those numbers are quite high. So it really depends on what that number is and what that safe number is.
Yeah, you know that example I gave earlier of Asia having higher levels of natural fluoride than other countries? I got it from the doctor. Some places in Asia, rural China and India in particular, have naturally occurring fluoride at concentration levels several times higher than what's considered safe for drinking water. Nobody added it. The government didn't put it there. It's just in the ground. And get this, the research showing that fluoride can harm developing brains comes from those precise regions. So the cognitive deficits that the studies are picking up on are occurring in children drinking that naturally high fluoride water, which is quite the problem for Anastasia's position, because if added by humans is supposed to be what makes fluoride dangerous, and naturally occurring fluoride at high levels is also harmless, then the natural/artificial line doesn't track harm, does it? The variable that's tracking harm is concentration. Dose.
So it really depends on what that number is and what that safe number is.
The thing about Asia is if that's naturally in the water, then people from Asia are naturally adapted to that, which means it wouldn't
So if you move to
This is a predictable response from a conspiracy theorist. Rather than abandon the natural versus artificial distinction, or heaven forbid, reconsidering her view, she invents an exception on the spot to save it. It's straight up special pleading. She's claiming that populations with high natural fluoride have evolved an adaptation to it, which means the counterexample doesn't really count.
People from Asia are naturally adapted to that.
And it's worth really saying this, clearly. This isn't a real adaptation. There's no evidence for it anywhere in the literature. She's just invented it on the spot. And the burden is on her to show it exists, not on the rest of us to disprove a hypothetical she conjured up to save her argument. But here's what really kills it. As mentioned, the very studies showing fluoride harms developing brains were conducted on children in those regions. Rural China, India, Ethiopia. The kids drinking that naturally high fluoride water are the ones showing the cognitive deficits. They've not adapted. They are the data. And if they were adapted, there wouldn't be a finding to point to in the first place, and there wouldn't be fluoride neurotoxicity literature at all.
People from Asia are naturally adapted to that, which means it wouldn't
so if you
affect
moved
them.
to Asia, you would have neurologic issues?
If you said it didn't apply to adults, then maybe not, because I'm already,
as a child.
As a child, probably. If you're not from that area, your body's not adapted to that, which means if there's studies shown that people who have high levels of fluoride in their body have neurological issues, then yeah, I'm sure that they would.
She bites the bullet. She accepts that non-adapted children would suffer neurological harm from naturally occurring fluoride. But notice what's happened to her position. She started out by saying that added chemicals are the problem, and pure water is the solution.
Why would I want water with an extra ingredient if I could just have pure water? You know what I mean?
Now, when forced to deal with naturally occurring fluoride, she's added a second clause. Natural fluoride harms people who aren't adapted to it.
If you're not from that area, your body's not adapted to that.
So her current position is added fluoride is harmful and natural fluoride is also harmful, just for a different reason.
You're not making any sense at all.
The thing both halves have in common is the fluoride, at a dose. The added by humans part is doing no work, because by her own account, the natural version harms too. Her position is dead. She just hasn't clocked it. But she does know that she's improvising, or at least I think she knows. She can feel how shaky her argument is. And if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you already know what's about to happen.
If there's studies shown that people who have high levels of fluoride in their body have neurological issues, then yeah, I'm sure that they would.
Well,
but also, on another note, hold on one second. On another note, why? Because if there's fluoride in the water and fluoride in the toothpaste and chemicals in our food, there comes a point where these things start stacking up. And I would much rather have kids with cavities than kids with neurological issues.
Before anything else, let's appreciate that she's pivoted. Again, that is not the topic that was on the table. She's reaching for a fresh angle because the last one, well, it didn't hold. Worth flagging, because it is becoming quite the pattern. Now, two things are happening here. First, she stacks every fluoride and chemical exposure that she can think of into one big pile and treats them as if they all add up to a single combined harm. But that's not how toxicology works. Different exposures, different routes, different doses, different substances. They produce different outcomes in different tissues on different timescales. Stacking up sounds like a dose claim, but it isn't. How much fluoride? From which sources? At what concentration? Over what period? None of that is here. It's the same vague emotional move the word chemical was doing earlier, just made to look quantitative. Second, and more importantly, she converts the whole mess into a forced binary. Cavities or brain damage. Pick one. As if those are the only two positions on the table.
And I would much rather have kids with cavities than kids with neurological issues. You know what I mean?
That's a false choice. You're not choosing kids with neurologic disease or cavities. That's not really the two choices you're making.
Mike names it instantly. It's a false dichotomy, and he is absolutely spot on. The choice in front of public health policy is not accept neurological damage or accept cavities. It's whether a regulated exposure at a specific concentration produces a net benefit. That is the question. It's a question with a numerical answer, not a horror movie answer.
That's not really the two choices you're making when you're making that decision.
So then what's the choice?
So I guess my question to you is, when you say chemicals, like oxygen's a chemical, water's a chemical. So how do I am trying to really get down to the core of your argument to better understand you. I'm not trying to get you in the gotcha, I promise.
Yeah.
Okay, so instead of fighting her on fluoride molecule by molecule, he's walking her back to the foundation of the entire argument to ask her, what is a chemical? If oxygen is a chemical, and water is a chemical, and the thing that keeps her alive are chemicals, then the word chemical can't be doing the moral work she's been demanding it do for the last 5 minutes. He needs a rule, a criterion, something that distinguishes the chemical she's against from the one she's by necessity in favour of. And he flags it explicitly.
I'm not trying to get you in the gotcha, I promise.
Recall that Mike opened with a friendly demeanour. Well, right now, he's cashing in on it. He's expressing that he's not trying to corner her. He genuinely wants to understand her position and the underlying principle.
I'm not trying to get you in the gotcha, I promise.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you decide what a chemical is? Is dihydrogen monoxide a chemical in your book?
Can you give me the short version?
Dihydrogen monoxide.
Is that oxygen?
No, that's water.
Water. Oh, water.
But like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can make
I'm not
anything.
a chemist or anything.
But
this dihydrogen monoxide maneuver is quite the moment. Mike's aim is to make this structural point visible. When she hears dihydrogen monoxide, she's suspicious. When she hears water, she's not. Same molecule, same effects, different label. The gap between her reaction to the word and her reaction to the substance is exactly the gap her whole argument has been operating on. Chemical sounds bad. Water sounds fine, but the word and the substance aren't tracking each other. And then there's this.
I'm not a chemist or anything.
But
that's the kind of disclaimer you reach for after a chemistry-flavoured word has already done its persuasive work. And to be fair, you don't need to be a chemist to oppose fluoridation. You don't need to have a PhD to ask a public health question. But you do need some rule for what counts as a chemical, especially when it's a chemical is your central objection. Otherwise, the objection is just a feeling, and the technical vocabulary is doing the persuasive work the reasoning can't.
I'm not a chemist or anything.
But I'm not trying to trick you.
No,
The
that's
point
a
is to
compound.
show
That's
you
a compound.
what's a chemical.
There's a thing, but there's a difference between endogenous chemicals, things that I can make, my body makes, right?
Right.
And exogenous chemicals.
That's a compound. Sounds like a recovery. But it isn't. A compound is a kind of chemical. The two categories aren't opposed. It's like saying that that's not a dog, that's a Labrador. Labradors are dogs. Compounds are chemicals. She's reaching for vocabulary that sounds technical enough to get her off the hook, but it doesn't land. It's not going to work against a doctor. And as for her last move, she now gives us a rule. Endogenous versus exogenous. If chemical can't mean artificial, maybe what she really meant all along is external to the body. Things the body produces are fine. Things that come from outside aren't.
And exogenous chemicals that
But does
come
your
from
body make
external-
water?
Does my body make fluoride?
But does your body make water?
Oh.
You need water to live.
He asks the question and he won't let her change the subject. Her counter-question, whether her body makes fluoride, tries to drag the conversation back to the substance that she distrusts, but Mike is testing the principle she just raised to see if it actually holds up, and he does so by pointing to the most obvious counterexample.
Does your body make water?
Something, by the way, that he's been doing throughout this whole exchange, and he keeps the focus on the rule. You need water to live. Because if the rule is endogenous good, exogenous bad, then water, which her body absolutely does not manufacture on its own, and which she absolutely needs from outside to survive, is a violation of the rule.
Does your body make water? You need water to live.
I need water to live. Okay, but my body is 72% water, which means that I am fully made of water. Like I was
Like
born.
we need essential
I was born
amino
with
acids.
water.
Amino acids. What a phenomenal point. There are nutrients your body cannot synthesize and must obtain externally. Essential in the technical biological sense means exactly that. The body needs things from outside. Exogenous does not mean harmful. The rule, once again, is broken with a phenomenal counterexample.
I was born with water.
And here comes a brand new rescue, and it's the third time that she's done this. First, it was natural versus artificial, then endogenous versus exogenous, and now I was born with water.
You know what I mean?
The category has shifted again. Human intervention has dropped out as the criterion. So has bodily production. Now it's whether it's been in use since birth. That's a different rule entirely. And really, it's a rule about familiarity rather than chemistry or harm. It's about what feels like part of you.
We need essential amino acids.
I was born with water. You know what I mean? I wasn't born with fluoride in my
Yeah, but the
system.
water came from your parent.
My what? Yeah,
From
my
your
parent, of course. But
who
I didn't
got
get
water
any...
from the environment.
That is clean as water, no pun intended. The water that she was born with came from her mother, and her mother got it from the environment. The I was born with it position collapses the second you trace where the water actually comes from, which is, of course, outside of the body. Same as fluoride, same as everything. 3 rescue attempts, 3 collapses. And let's not forget that we're still on the same word, chemical.
Who got water from the environment.
That's fine, but like,
So there's
where
certain
did the
things
first
we need.
single-celled amoeba get the water from? You know what I mean? Like, any living being has water, right?
Yeah, we've gone all the way back to the origin of life on Earth to figure out whether fluoridation is a good idea.
Start from the beginning so I can understand how.
All right, I'll tell you from the beginning. So, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Not that far.
Okay, not that far, my bad.
The amoeba detour is what an argument does, or well, has to do, when it has nowhere else to go. Sure, it's an interesting hypothesis that she's developing, a properly sophisticated criterion at this point, but it seems to rest entirely and solely on her intuitions.
Any living being has water, right? But
we
not everything.
need the water to survive. We need
That's
food
fine.
to
We're
survive.
not here to debate about water.
This is the white flag. We're not here to debate about water. Translation: this isn't going where I want it to, so the example gets dismissed and the question it raised goes, well, underwater. I'm sorry, I had to.
We're not here to debate about water.
Right.
So what's your point?
My point is, how do you decide what's a bad chemical versus a good chemical?
The effects on the body.
Okay,
Right.
pause. We're out of time.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
The timer had its way. She had seconds to land somewhere, and what she landed on is the effects on the body. That's the answer. That is the correct answer. And it's the answer that destroys everything that she's been arguing for the last 5 minutes.
The effects on the body.
Because if the rule is the effects on the body, then whether something is natural or artificial is irrelevant. Endogenous versus exogenous is irrelevant. I was born with it versus I wasn't born with it is irrelevant. What matters is dose, exposure, and outcome. Which is, and let this be the takeaway, at least as far as the substance is concerned, precisely the model that public health uses to set fluoridation levels in the first place. It's the distinction she never put on the table until literally the last second. And keep in mind, this whole fluoride conversation was a topic of her choosing. The actual prompt of the debate was,
My first rounded claim is that RFK Jr. is decimating public health and should step down as Secretary of Health and Human Services.
she picked the hill, and it turned out to be a particularly bad hill to die on. Mike gets the opportunity to reply with one slightly weary word.
Right.
He's not interested in gloating, partly because, well, he doesn't need to. She just walked herself, one collapsing claim after another, into a standard he's been holding the whole time.
The thing about Asia is if that's naturally in the water, then people from Asia are naturally adapted to that.
I don't even know them. I just thought that sounded cool.
Well, that was fun, wasn't it? Alright, here's the takeaway. Not the substance, we've already covered that one, but the move itself and how to handle it. Whenever a single word is doing most of the work in an argument, chemical, natural, toxin, pure, unnatural, ask, calmly, what the person using the word actually means. Not as a gotcha, but as a precondition.
Is dihydrogen monoxide a chemical in your book?
Because if the word can't survive being defined, it shouldn't have been carrying the argument in the first place. And once a definition is on the table, do what Dr. Mike did. Go for the principle, not the specifics. Test it. If the rule is endogenous is fine, exogenous is bad, point to water.
But does your body make water?
Point to essential amino acids.
We need essential amino acids.
Every framing that she puts forward is a claim about how the world works, and claims about how the world works can be checked against the world. So, check them. If that's her criterion, put it to the test. If it survives, fine. You can go to the specifics. If it doesn't, the criterion was never the real reason the person holds the position in the first place. Oh, and one last thing. If you've watched our videos before, and I hope you have, you'll have noticed that what Anastasia kept doing fits squarely under moving the goalposts, changing the criteria every time the last one fails, so that the position can't be pinned down. And the specific shape that she took here is worth naming in its own right. It's a series of ad hoc rescues, a fresh criterion conjured every time the previous one falls apart. So, if you caught it, honestly, good on you. Top marks. That is why we make these videos. Issues like this matter, and so does the ability to see clearly when someone's defending a position with rhetorical sleight of hand instead of evidence. And once the pattern has a name, it can no longer hide.
I wasn't born with fluoride in my
Yeah, but the
system.
water came from your parent.
My what?
Anyhow, as always, thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to everyone who supports the channel, including today's sponsor, Ground News.